Welcome everyone to the Modern Horizons 3 pre-release guide. But first, I have an announcement. We're back, baby. That's right. Just like Futurama, we get canceled, we get brought back. It's all good. Shout out to Wizards for providing me access to this event. So June 5th, I'll be streaming starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'd love if you join me, but if you can't, no worries. I post the videos to YouTube after the fact. You just can't join me in the chat and ask questions about the set, but it's a great way to prep for your pre-release because watching the cards live, watching them in action is really beneficial to everybody. So let's jump into the actual pre-release guide here. First off, the lands look amazing in this set. At common, you're going to expect in your seal pool to open quite a few of these colorless lands that go and fetch a basic of the type that's printed on the card. Not only that, but they can also just, before you do that, be tapped as colorless mana. That's important because there's a lot of Eldrazi's in the set that require colorless mana to be able to cast them. We also have a few of these rare lands that look pretty exciting. Maybe they'll go into your deck, maybe not. The 2-color sack and fetch cards are reprinted. And then at uncommon, we have a few waste cards, as well as a few other lands that are just really powerful and interesting in certain decks. But this set goes all out with lands, and there is so much more. So there are double-faced cards that are lands. There are ones that have a single color on them, like these. And then there's ones that have 2 colors on them. Either way, these cards are fantastic. I mean, think of it as a free extra spell in your deck. Sure, most times it's going to come in as land if it's early game, but late game, insurance policy against flood, right? So these cards are fantastic. In my seal pool, I'm definitely looking to play at least a few of these if I open them. Just good cards overall. So the most defining thing about the set is the power level. Everything's so strong because it's going straight to modern. But the removal is pretty scarce. I don't know if it's because we're coming off OTJ and there was so much removal there with breaking news in addition to the regular set, but I look at these removal cards and it seems like at the common level, there just isn't enough quality removal or enough removal, period. And I think a lot of seal pools are going to really be struggling to scrape together enough playables to have enough interaction. So I'm a little bit concerned about the quantity of removal in this set. That being said, the quality of the cards that are there are very good, but the amount that you get and the chances of you opening a good amount of removal in the colors that you want to build in is going to be a little bit lower than average, and I think you're going to feel that in the build process. So maybe you have to stretch your mana just a little bit to get more removal. Maybe you have to splash for removal, but definitely don't neglect the removal. The creatures are too good in this set for you not to have interaction for what's going on across the board, and there's really high synergy engines that you need to be able to disrupt. So make sure you focus on removal for this set because the card quality is so good. There's also just a handful of spells that aren't necessarily removal, but they support different deck archetypes or themes. I think blue has amazing card draw value and other value and support. If removal is scarce, then drawing more cards is a way to outpace your opponent. Also, in general, the better cards are, the better it is to draw more of them. And if it digs you closer to the best cards in the set, well, that's even better, right? So I definitely put a higher value on rummaging through your deck and drawing more cards and getting through your library for this particular set. Also be on the lookout for some combat tricks. If your pool is light on removal, you can always sub in some combat tricks to help you out. And another way to get around light removal is to ramp to the biggest thing first. So don't overlook Solar Transformer and Power Stone as valid ramp cards to put into your decks. Jumping to individual color analysis, if you're going to go into white, I actually think you want to focus on a control-heavy build. There are some aggro aspects to it, but really it's about the control and the removal. White has a huge flicker ETB synergy scattered throughout it, so I definitely would be on the lookout for things that like to be flickered and flicker enablers. I think most of the time when you're playing white, you're going to want to go into modified creatures of some sort with 1/1 counters or counters of any sort, or into an energy deck. And energy can be proliferated, so it is a counter on you, the player. So that's just something you should be aware of. But most of the time, like I said, white is very much going to be all about the control. I think when you go into blue, you're going to go into blue because you opened a very good creature in blue, or you plan on drawing a lot of cards for card advantage. Many times you're going to have a top end that's Eldrazi creatures. You might be playing an energy deck and supporting energy with blue, but mostly blue is just a support secondary color in general. You'll be splashing the best creatures from it, hoping to out-tempo and outvalue your opponent throughout the match. Moving on to black. Black has a huge graveyard theme. So sacrificing, removal, graveyard, get it back, value from that, loop it, repeat. That is what black wants you to do in the set. So I definitely think that if you're playing black, you're looking to control the board with removal and make the most out of your own graveyard value as the game progresses. Black also has a huge artifact theme where it cares about artifacts. I don't think it's nearly as important as the graveyard mechanics, but there is a artifact build that wants you to play black. Red is a very straightforward color. It's got burn, value, and then you're either playing energy into making 3/3 golems, basically, or you have an Eldrazi deck that's trying to ramp you into the biggest Eldrazi's and reward you for playing colorless creatures, or you're just going to finish it off top end with a Hellkite that sort of cares about artifacts, but you would still play this for 7 mana. So yeah, red's all about the burn support and value, go wide or go big. Pretty straightforward. I like to think that green can be just summarized by Nightshade Dryad and Horrific Assault, right? Ramp, fixing, bite spell, and these are at common. That's crazy. But what's even crazier is the other commons are really good too. Brood Scale, Evolution Witness, incredible. The Repurposer, even Dread Mask, Gift of the Viper is maybe one of my favorite combat tricks of the format. All I'm saying is these commons are pretty great. So I do think there's a high likelihood that your seal pool will want you to play green unless you're going the Jeskai energy deck. But otherwise, I think green's a pretty easy include for most builds. Green also has really nice payouts for 1/1 counters and modified creatures. And then I think it's the most logical color as a base if you're going to play Eldrazi's, just because it has access to so many ramps and good top-end Eldrazi cards. And it'll definitely get up to those win cons faster than any other color will. Those are the broad base, what is each color trying to do. Let's get into a few deck builds, because I actually think the color analysis isn't nearly as important in this set as which cards need to go in which decks. Because as you can see, most colors do have a slight place at minimum in every single deck. Obviously, some colors are more dominant for different archetypes, but this set is very fluid. You can mix and match. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to cross synergies. So let's dive in and try and break this down so it's a little bit easier to sort out. Let's jump into the modified creatures deck. A modified creature is a creature that is equipped, has an aura that's attached to it, or has a counter on it of any type. So it's a very versatile archetype that has a lot of backup and support in the set. It definitely has the most amount of cards that support you playing a modified creatures matter deck. And with Evolution Witness at common, you have a lot of good reasons to want to go into 1/1 counters matters. And the payouts are at common level, so you're more likely to open reasons to go into this deck. You know, obviously the white cards that are going into this are very good. I think the white modified cards are some of the best cards for this archetype, with Flicker and everything else and the value that it brings. Even the Planeswalker helps you put 1/1 counters on cats, so white is a good color to lean into if you're going to go into modified creatures matter. There's green-white, and there are some green-white signposts at common and uncommon that want you to lean into green with your white, and they're pretty good. Green cards as well for this archetype just are bonkers good, so I do expect green-white to be your base most of the time when you're playing modified creatures. However, it doesn't have to be. You could be playing black-green for sure, and there are some really nice payouts and enablers in this archetype for that. And then there's also, you know, ditch the green, go with white-black. I don't see you doing that as often, but certainly you could play an Abzan deck and go 3-color. The other thing I really want to point out is that the modified deck is so well supported that you should not lock into, I have to be Abzan. There are numerous cards that want to be splashed into this and would be worth going for. I would be careful though, because some of them are double off splash technically from the Abzan. So when including these, have mana fixing plans. But there's also single splashes that would be worthwhile. Nadu would be worth it. Genku looks great. Psychic Frog, fantastic. You know, even Eldrazi, red-green, is amazing. I mean, the Vanguard is fantastic for 1/1 counters. Blue shouldn't be left out. The Dreamtide Whale and Copy Crook play well in the modified creature build. And like I said, even red has a lot of support for modified creatures. So the hardest part of modified creatures is that you need to choose your colors, and your seal pool will probably have a build somewhere between all the colors to support this archetype. So just be aware that you don't have to be Abzan just to be playing modified creatures matter. I do also want to point out that the modified creature deck can be played with a lot of the other archetypes as a subtype, so don't be afraid to mix and match. Moving on to the Eldrazi deck, I think you should be careful with the Eldrazi deck. I want to rename the Eldrazi deck the Bring a Plan deck. Do not play an Eldrazi deck if you do not have a plan. The plans can be different, but just throwing in a 12 mana 12/12, as good as it is, well, you need a plan to land that 12/12, and if you don't bring a plan, it's probably just a dead card in your hand. So let's talk about what you should be doing if you're going to go for an Eldrazi deck. I think typically the Eldrazi deck is going to play in the Teamer colors just for the ramp. I do think that green base is where you want to be. Blue also really likes being in Eldrazi's because you're going to be drawing a lot of cards, so drawing into your best cards more frequently is really nice, and there's also some ramp in it. Red rewards you for having more Eldrazi spawn creatures on the board, sacking them, going wide, having bigger payouts for more colorless creatures. But I definitely don't think you should overlook the Eldrazi deck as just a Teamer deck. I think you should look at it as a deck that can play with black, because I can't think of a better play than to go ahead and search your library for 2 Eldrazi cards with Buried Alive, putting them in your graveyard, and next turn victimizing and putting them both on the battlefield. You will not get the cast trigger on the Eldrazi's, but who cares if you're putting a 12/12 on the board in turn 4? So you can play the Eldrazi's, just have a plan for them and make sure you're supporting them well enough. Otherwise, you're going to get out aggroed and ran over every single game. Which brings me to the mill deck. I think the mill deck is really good. It's not a deep supported archetype, but the cards that are there at common and uncommon make it viable and consistent. I think a lot of seal pools will have some element of graveyard shenanigans, and it plays well with almost every archetype. So I just think that it's a viable build, especially, like I said earlier, with Buried Alive and Victimize combo. And even though the graveyard self-mill deck wants you to be black and green, I definitely think black-blue has a place for self-mill / discard from your hand, especially with the Psychic Frog. Jund has a place for self-mill and recursion. Abzan has a place for recursion, self-mill. Just a lot of ways you can go with this deck, and that's why I think that having some sort of value from your grave is pretty important. And it pretty easily fits into any other major archetype that you want to run. Hopefully by now you're sensing a theme that all of these archetypes overlap in a very fluid way, and I have no problem playing a self-mill deck that's also an Eldrazi deck, or an Eldrazi deck that's also a modified creature deck. I think there's just so many ways you can go with this set that keeping an open mind for your build is probably a good idea, and really look for those combos. Moving on to energy. Normally you're going to be playing the Jeskai colors. My problem with the energy deck is that blue doesn't have any win cons in energy, even though it's one of the best enablers for energy. Most of the payouts in energy are coming from red. Aether Revolt, Ironworks are both reasons I would want a lot of energy in my deck. But there's also just other good payoffs like Raptor, Galvanic Discharge, Skyclaw, and even the Unstable Amulet just seems like an amazing amount of value. I think you're going to be playing white more than blue for your energy decks, and it also has some really nice payouts as well and enablers, so I wouldn't be afraid to go into Boros for energy. There is a good black card that does energy, but you don't need to put that in an energy deck, and the green energy card just seems, well, not in the right colors. Yeah, so I mean, Boros seems great. Blue-red seems okay if you have like the Windcaught in red and maybe the Battle Wagon to go with it. But otherwise, like, these cards are pretty medium, I guess. Same with the white-blue cards. I think the Gate Gargoyle is fantastic. Absolutely stellar card. But are they win cons in and of themselves? Probably not. I think Solar Transformer is technically an energy deck fixer, but I would play this in any deck. I would, like, this is a ramp card that goes into any deck, and it fixes your mana, it ramps you. Yeah, this card's fantastic. I also think that the land cards that also have spells on the back are really nice in the energy deck with Suppression Ray and Rush of Inspiration. I think Suppression Ray especially is going to be a very good card. When you're playing the energy deck, it'll be tempting to also play kind of like an artifact build within it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The artifact deck kind of wants you to be red, kind of wants you to be black. Certainly some of the best artifacts, like the Larva and the Hellkite at Uncommon, are reasons to go into artifacts. But I don't think you necessarily need to be playing an artifact-focused deck to make these cards good. But there is a lot of support in black for playing an artifact sacrifice deck, and red's artifacts are a little bit less great unless you're playing energy. And then, of course, you know, blue has the Cannoneer, green has the Dread Mask, and then white has 2 decent artifact-related cards on top of it. But honestly, I see the artifact deck as much more of a deck that you're not focused on. It's the other synergy you're going for instead of just the only synergy you're going for. So I definitely want to play artifacts. I just want to pair it with energy or modification creatures or something else. So those are the main decks I would say that most of your seal pools are going to play. I think there really aren't a lot of different options for decks like normal. This is a straight to modern set, not a standard set, so I don't think they really focused on being like, let's make 10 different decks. They just didn't do that. There just aren't as many different builds. I think the win cons I just covered are the win cons, and I think you should build your deck the best you can to make one of those work. And I'm just going to be straight out honest, I think most of your seal pools are going to be modified creatures matter. Occasionally you might open a great energy deck, occasionally you might get a good Eldrazi deck. Quite a few decks are going to have some nice graveyard stuff. I think quite a few seal pools will have a good card draw that maybe you shouldn't overlook in blue. And even though you should definitely have a win con that you're working towards and building on your synergies, do not neglect your removal. I cannot say that enough. I can't stress it enough. The creature quality is really high, so you're going to need to have interaction in this set. So make sure you're playing colors that have interaction and removal. I'm not going to show you all the cards I haven't shown you yet from the set. Some are good, some are bad, some you should throw into any deck, some you should just never throw into any deck. They just don't play with the synergies that the other cards from the set do. But just because they don't have synergy doesn't mean they're not amazing. Some of these cards are the best cards in the set or close to it. So if you're playing that color already for removal or for your win cons, go ahead and put these cards in and make them work in your archetype. The bad cards that are meant for modern that just read terrible are probably terrible. Just don't put them in. But the good cards that read great, slot them in if you are in those colors. Just because they're in the backside of this video, not necessarily in a deck archetype, doesn't mean they're bad cards. So certainly the Planeswalkers, some of the really great bomb creatures should go into every deck. But yeah, this set is bonkers. It's all over the place. It's wild. This is going to be a very difficult build. So have fun at your pre-release. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me. Make sure to tune in for my live stream if you can on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions, always feel free to leave them in the comments here. I do answer them. And if you have not already, please feel free to like and subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.